Oh, Annie here saw Sisters Brothers. Annie, what's the verdict?
Yeah, well, first of all, Sisters Brothers is a film by Jacques Audiard. His previous films are Rust and Bone, Prophet, and Deepan, if anybody knows those. All French films, I believe. So this is his first English-speaking feature. The film is starring Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly. They're playing the Sisters Brothers, who are two hitmen sent to kill a man named Herman Kermit Worm, which I heard as a worm, so I'll just be calling him Worm from now on. He's played by Riz Ahmed, known from Nightcrawler and the HBO miniseries The Night Off. Now, Mr. Worm has allegedly stolen something from the Sisters Brothers' employer, the Commodore, who's also sent a tracker or a scout, John Morris, after him, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, also from Nightcrawler. The story takes place during the gold rush, and Worm has managed to create a chemical formula that makes finding gold incredibly easy. It's that invention that then changes the characters' motivations in the film as well. The film is described as a dark comedy western, but I think it has much deeper tones than that. It discusses relationships. It offers slightly less whitewashed image of early America. Well, not early America, but that era of America. And to some extent, it speaks of the ignorance of the profit-seeking worldview that has dominated the market since the discoveries of the natural resources. I think it's fun film at times, but it's not a laugh-out-loud comedy for me, so that's why I wouldn't regard it as much as a comedy as it is a bit more of a drama, maybe. I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite film of the year, but it is pretty solid, I think. And I especially like the ending, because it is a bit, there's that mellowness of it, and it doesn't really follow, like, it is in comedy up until the end. It finds a kind of different tone towards the end.
Yeah, I think I'd largely agree with that. I did enjoy the film a lot as I was watching it, with a couple of caveats I'll get to. Jacques Audiard, so I've seen A Prophet and Rust and Bone. I haven't seen Deepan, but again, a lot of people whose opinions I respect thought a lot of that. And he's a very visual filmmaker, and his shot making's great, and his films, those certainly for me looked absolutely stunning. And he comes straight out of the gate with the Sisters Brothers. The opening shot is basically them kind of attacking this ranch, this house, like in the dark. And it's kind of this deep blue, and it's just illuminated by their gunfire. And that's basically all you see, and just flashes of it. And it's absolutely superbly done. Arguably, I would say, visually, it never quite gets up to that level for the rest of the film. But it's still an extremely well-made film in that regard. Beyond that, he feels like a slightly odd choice for the director of this one. And I think part of what Annie was talking about there is to do with it never quite finds its rhythm, I think, in terms of the tone. It kind of lurches between comedy and slightly more austere topics without ever really maybe fully blending them. You know, because you've got this, like John C. Reilly plays one of the Sisters Brothers, right? So two brothers with the surname Sisters, which that was confusing me a lot before I saw the film. I was like, where's the apostrophe?
Yeah, it also doesn't translate into any other language. So in Finnish, this is called The Brothers of Sister.
Yeah, the title maybe needed a bit of workshopping, to be perfectly honest. But it's at times it feels like what it's going for is it's going for like a Coen Brothers-y tone, you know, because there's elements of absurdity in it, and you can kind of feel that with the casting of John C. Reilly. He does his like everyman incredulity stuff, which he does extremely well, and that works really well against the kind of, you know, very earnest but, you know, good comedic timing of Joaquin Phoenix, who plays his brother. And in that regard, it all works very well, but it's just the tone never quite blends, because you got that, and then Riz Ahmed's character, you know, he has very grand ambitions about what he wants to do with this gold he's going to get. So there's a lot of talk about societies with an absence of profit, and, you know, things that, you know, prioritize their spiritual development, and like quite grand themes, and they're generally done quite well, but the problem is they feel completely apart from these slightly more darkly comedic bits with the Sisters Brothers, and it never quite blends those two bits together, in my view.
Yeah, well, he has good ideas, but the way he's extracting the gold is also just like destroying the nature. Bit of a spoiler there, but like it's kind of, I think it's a smart film in a way that it speaks on multiple different levels. So even though it doesn't just have a kind of one level story, when you think of it, or if you see it more than once, there's things that you can pick up and kind of stories that you can see the director writing into it and the screenwriter writing into it that are not explicit.
I have to say that my review has to be prefaced that I saw this on a red-eye plane coming back from the States. So, some of the beauty that you saw, I didn't get to necessarily see. It was very small and it kept saying Virgin Atlantic. But also, I agree with you guys in the sense that, this is an interesting pick for I've loved Rust and Bone. I really had a lot to expect from this film, and coming in with this Western, there's a lot of great dark comedies out there that are Westerns. You brought up the Coen brothers, but then there's also things like, one of my favorites, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, which has this kind of two characters, traveling, being searched out. And so it didn't get there in that way. And so I also got really sick from watching the probably the plain food, but also the the cutting of off of the arm and all those kinds of things. And also Rust and Bones about losing limbs, so he seems to have some weird fascination with that.
Yeah, I have noticed Jacques Audiard seems to love people losing spoiler alert for all Jacques Audiard's films here, by the way, but he seems to love people losing limbs. He also seems to love shooting people in the ocean. I mean, this is the only Western scene where I've never seen a director so desperate to get to an ocean shot, quite frankly. But it's a good film. It is a good film. It never quite blends it, but given that it is quite ambitious in that regard, I'm kind of willing to forgive it a little bit, because it has, if you look at kind of the thematic elements about, who Riz Ahmed's character kind of is meant to represent and who he ropes in to help him, which ultimately is kind of, I think it's probably not too much of a spoiler to say this doesn't really go according to plan, right? But his ultimate undoing, there's a certain irony about how that happens based on who he needs to help him achieve it. So it's got a lot of good ideas, and I think it executes them largely pretty well. The acting's very good. It looks really quite beautiful in places. It just never quite hangs together from scene to scene in terms of tone. You don't get a consistency from it, and I don't think that lack of consistency is deliberate, is the other thing. Because if it was deliberate and it was meant to throw you off balance, that's one thing. But I do think it is trying to aim for a consistent thing that's just not quite managing to do that.